Molly Duma is the Chief Procurement Officer at Transnet Port Terminals. Please join me in welcoming Molly Duma to the SAPICS stage.
Time for questions. Yeah. Okay. So we can start. All right, good day, everyone. My name is Molly Duma. As mentioned earlier, I'm the Chief Procurement Officer in Transnet Port Terminal. I'm here today, to talk about, our long-term, OEM strategy. Looking forward to spending time with you this afternoon. With me, I'm joined by the two colleagues, who's going to be part of the Q&A session, so at the later stage, when I'm done with the presentation, which is Wongile Dlamini, who's leading, this sourcing, event that we're discussing today. Then I've got Judas, who's leading the localization and enterprise and supply development aspect, of the strategy, that I'm taking you through this afternoon. All right, so I thought it would be appropriate, probably to introduce our business, probably high level, so that we also have the same understanding on what you're talking about. So Transnet is quite a big organization. As you know, we've got the OD, where I'm coming from, which is Transnet Port Terminals, which is based in Durban. So we're dealing with the operations, of all the ports, that are handled by Transnet. There is Transnet Port Authorities, which is our landlord. We've got TFR, which deals with rail. There is pipeline. There is properties. So it's quite a huge organization. But today's strategy that we're discussing, so I'm focusing more, on the port operation. So I thought it's very important, that we're all in the same page. The port operations, so it consists of, our Richards Bay, and Durban, terminals. We've got East London, we've got Ngqura, we've got Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, and Saldanha. So in these terminals, starting with the KZN, which is Richards Bay and Durban. In Richards Bay, you'll find that mainly, we're handling the bulk, the containers, and the break bulk. And then in Durban, we've got containers, break bulk, agri bulk, and automotive. In East London, we've got containers, break bulk, agri bulk, automotive. In Ngqura, we've got containers. In Port Elizabeth, it's containers, break bulk. Bulk and automotive. In Cape Town, it's containers and break bulk. And then in Saldanha, it's bulk, mainly, iron ore, and break bulk. So those are the customers, that have been service, in these different ports. All right, so the case for change, so which is what we're excited about and what we're discussing today. It is around our long-term OEM, sourcing strategy. So currently, we face with a lot of challenges, around equipment, reliability, availability of equipment to service our customers, and overall, asset performance. So we had to sit back, from the supply chain perspective, with our end users, which is our internal customers, and look in terms of what can we do differently, what can we change, so what can we do to improve the reliability of our assets and also the availability of our assets, so that we can continuously improve, our customer service, and Then the solution that we came about, is this long-term OEM, strategy, to acquire cost-effective assets. We reduce the ownership, cost and ensure efficient support through their lifespan. What we're looking for here, is not only the acquiring of the new assets. There is some assets that are due for replacement. There might be expansion, related, equipment that we need for our ports. So we're looking at the long-term strategy. So historically, we've been buying, piecemeal. So when there is a need, to maintain certain equipment, you'll go on tender. The supplier filling the documentation, competitive bidding, and that is taking long. And also to take note that some of these parts and equipment, they are imported. There is long lead time. Availability of spares in South Africa, it's a challenge. So that's why we had to look in terms of what can we do differently. And we've realized that we cannot do this alone. We need partners. We need to find partners, to change, Transnet Port Terminal in terms of performance and availability of equipment and improve customer satisfaction, while we're helping our economy, because our economy is relying a lot on us in terms of imports, and exports. Hence, we came with this strategy of long-term OEM. Normally, our contracts, they range from 3 years, 5 years. So in most of the industries, you'll hear about 3-year agreement, 5-year agreement. So today I'm talking about, we're changing the landscape. We're looking as far as 10 years, agreement, in terms of purchasing of equipment, depending on the lifespan of the equipment, in terms of the life cycle management, we're looking as far as 20 years, depending on which equipment, that we're going to be sourcing as part of this strategy as we roll it out. Okay, so the approach, there's around about 9 categories of port equipment that we've identified. So we're looking for partners, from the design, manufacturing, supply, delivery, testing, commissioning, which is the acquisition phase, of this project. And thereafter, we're also looking, as I've said, it can go as far as 20 years in terms of availability of spares, the maintenance of those equipments. So we want that partner to help us, to be with us in this whole journey, of improving reliability of our ports. Okay, just high level in terms of the vision, is sustainability, transforming our ports. We want them to be global industry leader, leveraging, technology, that delivers enhanced value, for our customers, strengthen the competitive position, of South Africa, as I've said earlier, so imports and exports, so that go via sea mill are happening in our ports. Hence this is important, for this country. The goal is to improve the performance and reliability of our equipment and also enhance investment and creation of jobs, manufacturing opportunities into South Africa. So we're expecting OEMs, to partner with the locals. So we want locals to be part, of this journey. So there is an expectation, to the successful, bidders, that, they'll transfer skills, they'll work with the locals. We look at manufacturing capability and opportunity in South Africa, which then will create jobs, and help, to improve the scenario that we have currently in terms of unemployment. So that's one of the opportunities, that, we want to achieve with this particular strategy. Objectives mainly, enhance liability, enhance liability and availability of revenue earnings, equipment over the life, of the assets, ensure optimized sourcing, we talk about optimized sourcing again, instead of, engaging, on the sourcing event as the need arise. If we have this long-term availability of contracts, so then our end users can draw from the contract. If there's need for spares, there's need for maintenance. If we need to acquire, we then have to go through our lengthy process, of sourcing again. Okay, and then cost savings, in a sense that we're going economies of scale. So this is looking in terms of all our terminals, as highlighted earlier. if in this piece of equipment we partner with this OEM, it will be all for all our terminals. It's not going to be a contract per terminal. So we look at economies of scale, so that we can negotiate, and get better deals in terms of pricing. Enhance supply development and localization opportunities. We believe, if it's long-term contract, then it affords the OEMs to work with us, in a long-term solutions in terms of manufacturing and helping the local SMMEs, and other suppliers, and the standardization, of the equipment and spares. So in a current scenario, we have, equipment from different OEMs. Then you'll have a challenge, in terms of keeping spares. Sometimes you need to keep the same spare, twice or three times because it's different equipments, the same equipment from different OEMs. So what we want to achieve, with this strategy, so if we partner with one, OEM, that means then we only have to keep, one part, spare part. So it's like if you go in terms of the car, so everyone owns the car, probably it's an easy, scenario to take. If you have a Toyota, you have a Mercedes, you have an Isuzu, so they all have different parts and different components, that you need to keep to ensure that your equipment is running, when there's a breakdown, there's a quicker response time. So if you standardize, on a certain equipment, to one OEM, then it reduces the cost of your inventory as well. You need to keep less inventory because you need to keep spares, that are standardized across the business. All right, so one of the things that we thought was very important, for the success, of this particular strategy is to understand the market, to understand the dynamic of the market, what is available in the market. So what we did differently in order to understand the market, we decided to go for requests for information. We wanted to understand what is available, so who's available in the market, so what technology, so what solutions, what opportunities are there, so in order for us to develop the equipment specifications, and understand the drawings, that we might need, determine the spare part and maintenance, requirements, local supplier empowerment, which we're going to be partnering with DTI. We want TE where possible as well, our Transnet Engineering to be part of it. And then determining the budget requirements, so we went out, on this RFI process, where we went out to the market, and the reason we're showing this is because we really mean business. So we're really moving, with this particular strategy. We've already done some work. We are making progress. We advertised it, in 22 March. So we received proposals from 19, suppliers. When we started, we opened it, for everyone because still wanted to understand the market, what is happening there. We did not restrict it to the OEMs. OEMs were invited for presentations. An OEM presentation took place, and from that information, then we developed, our scope of work, evaluation criteria, all the expectation that we have, from this particular RFP process. We've went out of RFP, we're in process, we're going to touch on that later. All right, just high level, we talk about localization, so for Transnet, Port Terminal, and Transnet, localization is key and is very important. We already did some analytics, in terms of, where the opportunities are, for localization in terms of parts and components, and on some of the cranes, STS cranes, we've identified booms, trolleys, spreader, cabins, legs, cable and wire ropes, and, for RTGs, we've got hoist, rims, steel structure, tires, cradle carriers, hoist system, spreader, rims, brakes, tires. We've done some analytics as well to identify, what are the opportunities that are there, in terms of, localization, which is local manufacturing, but for this particular tender, stakers and reclaimers and ship loaders, they're not part of the RFP that we've done already, but it is other areas where we're looking for localization opportunities. So the equipment that you don't see there that are part of this RFP, is mobile harbor cranes, is empty container handlers, haulers, and forklifts. So we've done some analytics to understand where are the opportunities, for localization. All right, so the benefit to the ports terminals, what is benefit that we see out of this strategy or out of this request for proposal, process? So we want to, unlock affordability, as part of their proposals. We're expecting them, to share with us ideas in terms of financial solutions, funding solutions. So what models are there in the market? So that obviously we spoil for choices, in terms of how do we go about rolling out of the strategy of replacement of our equipment, and expansion, in terms of the equipment that we need. And then cost-effective, which is economies of scale. I spoke about the standardization of equipment and the benefits of that. You don't have to duplicate spares. Availability of spares, that's one of the critical areas. So we want to have service level, agreements as part of this. Some of the challenges that we have currently, so the lead times, when you're importing, some of the parts, and the spares and the components, it takes longer, and our equipment stand, for a longer period of time. As part of the solution, that we're expecting from this particular strategy is a quicker response time, from the OEM. Hence, we're expecting localization, local manufacturing, where possible. We want them to keep consignment stock, so we can reduce the inventory holding on our side. So we want as much as possible what can be done locally to be done locally, so that obviously the response time, is quicker. We can benefit from this strategy. Enhance supply development and localization. I've touched of that. Further expectation. We want the latest technology. We want automation where possible, with the equipment that you're going to buy going forward. So we want to move with the industry. We want to move with the game. We want the latest. We're expecting innovation from these partners. Innovative thinking, innovative ideas, economies of scale, definitely, extending the lifetime of the TPT equipment, availability of spares, training and skills transfer, to Transnet employees, is one of the expectations that we have. Supplier development initiatives, set up local industries to become an exporter. So when these local suppliers, are set up, in this partnership, so there's an expectation that these local suppliers will be able to export, probably to the customers of this OEM and beyond that. So not only to supply Transnet, because their business need to be viable. In manufacturing, you need volumes to be viable. So we are cautious of that. That's the expectation when we get to this partnership. They must also help these local suppliers, to find the market, outside South Africa, so that their business are sustainable. And also in South Africa, if there is also customers who are using the similar parts, components, so they should be able to tap in, to that industry or that market, so that these businesses are sustainable, which are going to be born from this partnership or be grown from this partnership that you're talking about. So that is, the high-level benefits, over and above sustainability, reliability, availability of equipment, to Transnet. All right, then the localization benefit, as part of the benefit from this strategy, working together with our internal partner, which is Transnet Engineering, so as I've mentioned, spare part manufacturing is key investment in manufacturing and assemble in South Africa in terms of the plants, is expected out of this. OEM will share intellectual property and technology, with these local suppliers, which will be identified to be part of this. Export promotion, is highlighted earlier. Sustainable job opportunities. It is a long-term contract. We're talking 10 to 20 years, for life cycle management. So we're expecting, sustainable jobs, to come out of this strategy. Skills, transfer, And then as Transnet, we also have partnered with NACAM, which is a National Association of Automotive Components and Allied Manufacturing, and also NEF, is our partner in terms of supply development, for these projects, and other projects that we have in terms of localization. We also, going to be working, with trade and industry, in competition, DTIC, on their NEP program, which is the National Industrial Participation Program. So it's expected that, on contracts, they have a value, of greater than $5 million, so 30%, of the import value, so must be sourced locally, which is the requirement, from these local suppliers, so, and then this is discharged over a period of 7 years, so we went out of this RFP, I think it was the 15th of January, because of certain benefit that we saw if we do, go out, because there's change in legislation that took place, I think, on the 16th of January. We wanted to benefit as much as we can, on what was legislated in South Africa during that time. So there is really a lot of requirement in terms of transformation and expectation, from these partnership, agreements that we are working on. And then we think this is attractive, to the OEM, for the fact, that we're going to be giving, we're going to be giving them a long-term agreements, as far as the 10 years acquisition, so which is not, the norm, so that's the change, that we are bringing with the strategy. And they will be responsible for the maintenance of our equipment, and a supply of spares, so for a period of 20 years, depending on the equipment. Some of them might have a shorter lifespan, reduce long RFP processes, once this contract is in place, so then they've got security as well in terms of knowing that, we're responsible for this equipment, for Transnet, they can plan, they can bring spare parts in South Africa, working with the local, partners, so they can project, in terms of their sale, based, on our forecast in terms of what we need as a business, which we're going to be discussing with them as they become partners, economies of scale, so they're going to be getting, large volumes from us, once they have this contract, and be able to expand their footprint as well, by establishing manufacturing plants in South Africa. So in high level, so that is the OEM strategy, that we wanted to share with you, in this session today. Thank you. Right.
Okay. Any questions?
So can I request the two colleagues, very important colleagues, probably to... By the way, we also have our group CPO here, Vulene Mukula, supporting us in this discussion today. So if you have any question, around Transnet in general, so the big boss is here as well, and thanks for joining us. He pays our salaries, as we are sitting here. So I'll hand over to you, in terms of then the questions, if there's any questions. Thank you.
Good morning. Just a question from me around OE versus aftermarket. If you look at the age of TBT equipment, I'm sure that most of it is fairly old. And my first question is, was some kind of audit or analysis done on the age of the equipment before you embarked on the strategy? And the second one is, so in terms of this OE strategy for new equipment that you would have started from zero, I say start from zero, the whole CapEx process, that makes sense to me. But having worked with TPT in the past as a second tier supplier, and that's my old job, so I've moved on. But my experience, the aftermarket local guys were a lot more responsive to TPT, were a lot more sensitive to breakdowns, etc., as opposed to the OE guys who had old equipment there. In some cases, the OEs weren't even represented still in KwaZulu-Natal. So I just want maybe your thoughts on that as well.
Okay. Look, probably the answer is yes. So we have, or is my mic, is this one still on? Can you still hear me? All right. So the answer is yes. So then in this strategy, so we also have considered equipment that still have life. So we are embarking in an RFP process, to make sure that, we have a solution for that as well, in terms of, it might not be a 10-year, 20 years, probably 5-year, agreement, with the existing OEM, in terms of the solution for the existing equipment, and also going forward, as I've highlighted, so we will be working with the local suppliers. They will be part of this. The different that this strategy is bringing, we want the OEM to transfer the skills. We want them to be part of this journey, because we have realized that, sometimes some of these parts that we get, that are generic, they're not reliable, and they don't last longer. They create a safety hazard, for us. We've seen, safety incident happening, on generic equipment that are not approved by the OEMs. We've seen them breaking down, quicker than expected, which result to the equipment, then standing longer, and obvious loss of revenue. We want OEM to be part of this, to transfer the skill, to help these guys, to give us the quality that we need, so that it's going to take longer before we maintain equipment again. So it's like your car. So if you have a Mercedes or Toyota, so there's nobody who understands, that particular car than the people who manufacture that car. I've got a friend, just to give you a scenario, who owns, an Audi. So he took, this Audi to the generic suppliers to just change a bulb. Nothing seems to be complicated. So normally when you change a bulb, that you need to open the bonnet, and you find a place to open, then you change a bulb. So they did that, so they went to the generic workshop, because the car is old, you want to save cost, probably there's also faster response time if you go to the generic workshops. So they broke the car in such a way that something that's supposed to have cost 100 or 200 rand to fix, now you need to spend 20,000 rand, to sort out the electrical part of the car, because they shouldn't have opened the car at the top. They're supposed to have removed the tire at the bottom and open underneath the car, then change the bulb. So that is the expectation. We do expect locals to be part of this, but we need OEMs, to hold hand with them, to transfer the skills, to understand in this particular car, this particular then port equipment, how do you go about doing it? Because it's become even longer. It takes long if someone doesn't know what they are doing. So we're just changing it a bit. We're tweaking in terms of the approach. We need the knowledge, we need the skill. So in our view, that's what's going to help us to improve in terms of the reliability of our equipment and the availability going forward.
Thank you. Any more questions? Can I ask a question? You've got a target of 30% of components, I think over a 7-year period. But your RFI went out in 2022. Sort of where are you at now at this stage? Because I presume the 30% should be after the 7-year cycle is complete.
Okay, so look, at the moment, so what I highlighted, it's how we went about to understand the market and the opportunities. The RFP have just closed, so we're going to be embarking on the evaluation process. I think from the evaluation process, looking what the OEMs have put forward, only after we've concluded the agreement, then NIP and DTI is going to start with that process, of 7 years that we're talking about. So we are at the second stage of phase 2 now of this particular initiative in terms of rolling it out. We have not signed any agreement, we've not awarded, so we're in progress at this stage.
Okay. Would we ever get to a stage where we are going to manufacture the complete units? You've got sort of spare parts here, sort of an accumulation of spare parts. Will we ever build, sort of rubber-tired gantry cranes and stackers and that thing, the complete units?
Sorry, I couldn't gather the question.
Sorry, will we ever build complete units? All the list of items that you mentioned there are essentially spare parts or components.
Yes.
But will we ever build a complete handling thing like rubber-tired gantry cranes and stackers and all those kind of things? Will we ever do the complete units?
Yeah. Do you want to take it? Yeah.
One, two.
This one. Yeah.
Good. Where are we? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So I think I'm not sure if voice is audible though.
Okay.
Okay. So at the present moment, the components or the spares is the maintenance part. So we actually do acquire where they come into the port and they build the actual RMG and the actual RTG. So we do have the fully put together equipment. So the spares and the parts are just for the maintenance part of it, where there's something that could have gone wrong in the certain part of the RMG or the RTG, then we will call in a technician via the OEM and using the local guys to come and maintain on the actual equipment. So on the port, we really have a fully built RMG, RTG, STS crane. So we do have those in the ports.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions?
Thank you. Just a quick question. In terms of the contract period, I think I might be wrong. I remember seeing a 10-year term, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, that's very good. I'm just wondering why is that period rather not linked to the life of plant? I don't assume that these equipments would probably last much longer than 10 years. From the localization perspective, I think you'll stand a much bigger chance, if it's linked to the life of plant instead of just, arbitrary. Well, I'm not saying it's arbitrary, but 10 years for me seems way too short to create real incentive to bring business in terms of manufacturing to South Africa. Thanks.
We are in agreement with you. The 10 years is for acquisition. And then we said then for the life cycle management, which is maintenance and spares, as far as 20 years, depending on the equipment. If the equipment lifespan is less than 20 years, then obviously we need to consider that, in this particular process. So you're spot on. We're in agreement.
So I would like to know how would you have determined what to keep and how much to keep around this range of equipment that you have within the ports? Which spares do you keep and how much do you keep? Are you guys using some data analytics or some collaboration with other departments to actually get to a point of what is the right mix of spares that you should be keeping for your kit?
Yeah. Look, I think in terms of the general, MRP, plan, you need to understand the history and the usage, and you also need to understand then, so what maintenance need to happen towards the future, and then based on that, you need to determine, in terms of, how much spares you need to keep. But the benefit, from this strategy that we have, so we're moving beyond that. That is why we partner with the OEM. There is nobody who understands Toyota more than Toyota. So there is a reason some of the cars, have 10-kilometer service, some have 20-kilometer service. That is why we're partnering with the expert, which then we expect them, to assist us going forward, in terms of for this particular equipment, what needs to change when, so what is required, to make sure, that the equipment is available when it's needed to be available, at the port. So they are experts. That is why we're working with them going forward, because there is always an opportunity. So we're seeing this opportunity as one of the solutions to help us to improve in terms of those decisions that we're making, because sometimes the history can mislead you, so you can get it wrong. But the OEM, they know very well in terms of, so what need to change when on the equipment that you're going to purchase going forward. Even with the existing one, we're bringing those OEM on board so that they can assist us as well, with the maintenance strategies and solutions.
Thanks. Sorry. If I may ask, if you or if the OEM is gonna indicate to you when certain parts is gonna break on that equipment, why do you need to keep the space? Because then money is gonna lying in your stores or in your warehouse or something like that. So if the OEM is gonna give you a direction is that thing is gonna break within 3 years' time, why do you keep the spare for it? Spare parts. I mean, it's gonna be your money is gonna lie in your stores and just, or even maybe let me make an example. Your technician, which is gonna work into close collaboration with the OEM. Why don't you let him come in and fix that thing? He must replace the part that needs to be replaced. He must just bill you then, instead of you gonna keep all these spare parts and all that. Does it make sense?
I hear what you are saying, so probably the question you're asking is a question around just in time. So, why not just in time? So at the moment, as I've indicated, we're in the RFP process, so it probably thinks that, so we're going to see as it unfold in terms of what they are proposing as solutions. As I've highlighted, we're looking at innovative thinking, we're looking at different thinking, and we're looking at, consignment stock as well. But mainly, in my view, you keep parts, because you want a quicker response time. So you don't want a response time to take longer. For example, with this particular contract, we're expecting, the OEM, to respond, if I'm not mistaken, within the same day, in terms of fixing the equipment. So if you don't keep any spares, how long does it take to manufacture? So I don't think we have that time. So we need to make sure that, the response time and the replacement time of the parts and component is quick, because the demand is there, from our customers. So I see a hand from Vule. I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
I think you've covered me, but the issue is that we don't have any intention of keeping any spares. It will be fully consignment stock. The OEM will be the ones that will keep spares, and when we need anything to be fixed, they will sort it out, and then they will only bill us for the spare that is used in terms of the repair that was done. And that's why Moholi was talking about the local suppliers. The local suppliers, the intention is that in terms of the first line of maintenance, it should be done by the local small, medium enterprises, as part of the development. Thanks.
Just an observation. I think in your responses, you place quite a large emphasis on the OE to protect you. My question is really around, and I'm the SMME as well in terms of being the first line. So where is, as you as a customer, where's your checks and balances around verifying that in fact the work that's required is in fact required, in terms of checks and balances on your side?
So probably the question you're asking if it's necessary for maintenance to take place. Look, your question is quite technical, but we do have an engineering team, that, if you look at our presentation, we spoke about transfer of skills, probably there is also an ambition, so I know that is not, a definite must that they work with TE, so there is an expectation in terms of transfer of skills, and knowledge as part of this process, for our own employees, so the expectation is that, our employees should learn, in this process. They should be able to understand this equipment better as well, to ensure that check and balance, is happening. We're not going to fold our hands, and say that, OEM, you are on your own. So we're expecting them to transfer skills, to the local suppliers and, to our technical world. But however, I'm probably unfolding, a process that's still going to unfold. Hence, I've highlighted to you that, we want to see in terms of what the guys have proposed. Probably next year will be a better time, to give the actual, achievement, out of this particular strategy. We're expecting different proposals, so probably we are expecting, these OEMs to put forward, in terms of, what they can do in terms of transfer of skills as well, as part of this process. So how they've responded, I can't tell you at this stage. I see there's a hand from Vule, as well.
Yeah, our expectation as an organization is that when we get to interact with the OEMs, the expectation is that we want the equipment to work every time when it's expected to work. And we're not going to go there and start to become the policeman of the OEM. And what we are looking at is to make sure that at least we get the productivity coming from the equipment. And if the OEM is saying that, for them to be able to get productivity, they need to change this, they would go ahead and do that. And the downtime that we are going to experience, is part of what we need to deal with, like what Moholi has indicated in terms of the proposals that we're going to receive. But our expectation, we're going to work in a very simplistic format where we are saying that we are contracting you to get the equipment to do what it's supposed to do. At the time when the equipment is not doing what it's supposed to do, we are losing revenue. We might need to put in some processes in place. But like what Moholi has indicated, we are waiting for proposals. Once the proposals are here, then we can be able to look at it to see how do we best manage it. But our intention is not to go there and tell the OEM that this is broken. So for them, if they feel that it's broken, but they can still operate safely, then they will carry on and operate safely. But for us, it's basically we are trying to get the hours when the equipment is supposed to do what it's supposed to do. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I just want to ask, taking a couple of steps back, before the RFQ was actually sent out, the actual putting down of the specification for the equipment that is required, how was the consultation done, or how did you go about? Did you actually include the private sector or the actual end users of not end users of the equipment, but the supply chain that is going to be very reliant on that equipment? To ensure that the capital expenditure that you are doing is actually really what is required in the ports. Not that I'm saying that we're going to buy obsolete stuff, but that it is really going to be utilized for the benefit of the complete supply chain. Thank you.
So I think Holly alluded or spoke to the RFI process where we went out and then we received information from various OEMs and agents on the market. So this was our first part of analyzing the market. Maybe the current specifications that we have as Transnet that we've been going out in RFP is now outdated, and there's something else that we can receive on the market that could give us better results, faster results, at any point. So we first started with the RFI. Then from all the proposals, the ideas, the thoughts that we received, we then sat down with the engineers, we sat down with the corporate planners, we sat down with everybody that's going to be utilizing these equipments to say, this is what we generally go out and this is what we are looking to achieve. This is what is on the market. How can we infuse the two to ensure that we are getting the correct specification and value for money? Then we went on to then look at our budgets and what's going to be the equipment that's currently on hand that is becoming obsolete, that is becoming old. Those are the ones we're looking to replace. So we do have a plan in terms of when we are purchasing, how we are going to be purchasing, and when these equipments are going to be utilized and for what reason they're going to be utilized. But the specification that we did go out in the RFP has infused all the changes in the market, all the analysis in the market, and especially what we as TPT need done in terms of bottom line. All right.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I wish you all the best of luck in what you're doing. I think the more local industry and local skills we have, the better it is for everybody else. And obviously TPT is a very important part of South Africa. So could I just ask you to give us a hand? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.